Good evening, everybody. My name's Shad Thomas. I'm here with Jamie Widener and our special guest, Kyle Mangus tonight. Sorry, Kyle. I got your name wrong there. We are Paranormal Lens, and this week we are talking about White Hill Mansion. Kyle is the vice president of the Friends of White Hill Mansion, so he's going to be here to give us some information, correct me on my history, and anything else like that we need to do. So if you're ready, I'm ready to get into this.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
All right. So right off the bat, I'm going to say, the history of the mansion is really complicated. The Field family has so many repeated names, sometimes within the same generation. Jamie, it'll remind you of Booby's Brewery. So while researching this history, I found a lot of contradicting information that was hard to decipher. The time frame that the stage of the house was built is confusing, and I'm hoping I did my best to sort it out. But Kyle, I'll rely on you for any corrections.
No problem. We'll get through it.
All right. Jamie, if you want to hit that next slide. Let's see. Just south of Trenton, New Jersey, in Burlington County, on a bluff overlooking the Delaware River, stands the White Hill Mansion. Next slide. The land was originally settled by the Native American Lenape tribe, and specifically the Unami clan, and that means the people downriver. The Lenape migrated seasonally, and they used the bluffs overlooking the river as their winter encampment. Next slide, please. In 1664, King Charles II created the colony of New Jersey and gave control to the Duke of York. The Duke of York assigned proprietorship to Sir John Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. This allowed them to govern as well as own and sell land. Next slide. 10 years later, in 1764, proprietorship of New Jersey was divided. East and West New Jersey were created. Berkeley retained West New Jersey, which he promptly sold to John Fenwick in trust for Edward Billage. I'm not sure how that pronunciation is. When the English Quaker Fenwick and Bylage quarreled, 3 Quaker trustees, including William Penn, mediated the dispute. Adding to these difficulties, the Duke of York refused to transfer the power to govern West Jersey to the Quaker proprietors. In 1677, the city of Burlington was created, and in 1694, the county of Burlington was formed. In 1702, East and West New Jersey became New Jersey again. This was due in part to the sprawling settlement and lack of central control. Burlington County continued to grow as a Quaker area. About 8 miles northeast of Burlington City, there is an area of land that was defined in early property records as White Hill. One source states that the name came from the look of the hill when all the apple trees were in bloom. It is in this area that Robert Field and his wife, Mary Taylor, purchased around 300 acres of land in 1722. It is believed that they built a one-room house with a loft. It was from this house that Field ran his businesses. This included a port with a small commercial wharf, a large farm, and several other businesses. When Fields passed away in 1757, his son, Robert II, inherited the estate. Next slide, Jamie. Robert was a wealthy lawyer and built a large house close to the original house in 1760. This house is the base of what still remains today. The next slide. The house was a brick house that included Flemish bond brickwork on all sides of the house. This was a more expensive exterior treatment, and using it on all the sides of the house was a statement of wealth. He married Mary Peels in October of 1765. Next slide, please. Mary and Robert II had 7 children, only 3 that survived to adulthood. Robert II died mysteriously in 1775. He fell out of a canoe and drowned. Next slide. On February 6, 1775, the newspaper Dunlap and Claypool's American Daily Advertiser reported, on Saturday night, as Robert Field Esquire of White Hill, New Jersey, was going on a canoe on board his shallop, he unfortunately fell overboard and was drowned. He only had his companion with him, who threw over the paddle to him, but Mr. Field sunk immediately. By this untimely accident, his relations, friends, and neighbors have lost a worthy and agreeable companion. Now, it should be noted that Fields didn't agree with King George III, especially when it came to taxation. As a Quaker, he chaired the New Jersey branch of the anti-taxation group called the Committee of Correspondence. There are beliefs that he was accompanied on his boat by either a loyalist or a spy who may have had a hand in his death. His estate at the time included several hundred acres, a bakehouse, 6 slaves, a vessel, a commercial wharf, and a large brick manor house on the river. This house operated as a riverside tavern for many years. When Field passed, the control of his estate went to his wife, Mary. At the time, Mary was pregnant with their 7th child. As the first child, named Robert, hadn't survived, Mary named this son Robert. She was tasked with running the farm and the businesses. In 1776, Mary Field was visited by Captain Thomas Houston of the American Navy. Houston docked his ship at the wharf and had dinner with Mary. Field's neighbors were loyal to the crown, and seeing that Mary was hosting the American Navy, she was reported as a colonial sympathizer. With this information, the British Army, on December 8, 1776, invaded the home and property multiple times looking for colonial soldiers. It is not believed that they ever found any, but 4 days later, in mid-December, Captain Carl August von Redden of the Hessian Army, Whitehall his headquarters. According to the reports, Rendon was a pure gentleman. Next slide, please. Several prominent loyalists and the highest ranking Hessian, Colonel von Donop, visited the home during this period. They made the home their headquarters until the Hessian defeat in Trenton. It was during this stay that it is believed that von Donop put a protection order in place for the Field property. On December 28th, American troops came through Whitehall looking for horses and wagons. Every horse and wagon in the area was taken with the exception of those owned by Mary Field. General Mercer had forbidden that anything be taken from Field. It is because of this protection that the property is still in existence today, for many other buildings from that time were burned during the war. Next slide, please. In 1779, Mary and Commodore Thomas Reed of the Pennsylvania Navy were married. Reed named Whitehill his county seat. They lived in the home until Reed died in 1778. Mary remained in charge of the property until she signed it over to her son, Robert III, and his wife, Abigail Stockton, in 1797. All right, next slide. It is believed that Robert III made improvements to the mansion and connected the two buildings in about 1800. Unfortunately, Robert didn't manage finances well, and in 1804 was forced to sell Whitehill. Abigail's brother, to save face for the family, purchased the home and allowed his sister and brother-in-law to live in there until they died. It was also in 1804 that Robert sold part of the property to Jonathan Ray of Trenton. This land was mapped out as a town, and he began selling parcels with narrow lots and alleys. The area became known as Whitehill. Next. The history of ownership gets difficult to track after the Field family. We do know that in 1821, David Bruce Sr. bought the home. Next slide. His son, David Bruce Jr., invented a new typecasting machine in 1832 and new typefaces, including a variation of Times Roman. It is believed that this was done in the attic of the mansion. Bruce Jr. held several patents for improvements to printing and type that revolutionized the industry. Isaac Field purchased Whitehill in 1847, though I couldn't find much about his time there. In 1850, Whitehill was formally incorporated as a borough and renamed Fieldsboro as a nod to what the Field family had done for the area. Next slide. In 1885, Joseph Mayer purchased the property. Mayer was the founder of a pottery company called Arsenal Pottery. He is believed to be the creator of several pottery techniques and a jiggering machine. This is a process that uses a spinning mold and a template on a weighted arm to roughen the pottery. His work can be found on at least 2 fireplaces in the mansion today. It is a probability that Mayer had a kiln in the basement. Next slide. In 1896, Whitehill Mansion was traded to Joseph Crosley for the sum of $10,000 and a building in Trenton. I'm not sure if it's related or not, but Crosley owned a machine company that made machines tasked to process clay for chinaware, porcelain fixtures, bricks, and other clay products. So next slide. In 1897, it is believed that Archibald Crossley was the last person to be born in the mansion. He studied at Princeton University for 1 year and then went on to develop methods, created standards and ethics for public opinion polling. In the 1930s, he was the leader in radio broadcast market research. Crossley was hired by Hearst Publications to conduct presidential election polls. Next slide. He, along with Elmo Roper and George Gallup of Gallup Polling, predicted the Roosevelt victory. His work has been used as the basis for polling and is still in use today. According to the podcast Haunted Road, the Crosleys moved out in 1911, and the house was sold for $1 to Susanna Graham. It is believed that during this period, the property operated as a bordello with hidden stairs that led to an attic. There isn't much information about this time period, but I did find a record of a Susie Graham that lived on Burlington Street around this time period. In 1922, Heinrich and Katrina Glenk purchased the property and converted it into an upscale German restaurant opening in 1923. Glenk was a waiter. He had immigrated to the United States in 1905 and had a prestigious waiter's degree from a European school. He became friends with many politicians while working at Trenton's Hotel Sterling. His reputation was enough to get him the loans to buy the mansion. When he opened the restaurant, the politicians followed. Next slide. In a Philadelphia Inquirer article, Mrs. Glenk is quoted as saying, "For years and years, this was New Jersey's real Republican headquarters." Mrs. Glenk, both the Glenks were Democrats when they needed to be. They played both sides of the fence as they had to. For almost 50 years, the Glenks operated the mansion as a restaurant. It was known as Glenk's White Hill Mansion Restaurant. Glenk excavated the basement, lowered the floor by 2 feet, and added a bar. Mrs. Glenk, in the Inquirer article, talks about a tunnel behind the bar. During the early days of the mansion, it is believed that it was used to transport goods from the river. During the searches of the house in the Revolutionary time, it is rumored that up to 27 soldiers were hidden in the tunnels. The Glenks converted the tunnel into a wine cellar. And there you can see that in the one picture. Can you back up there, Jamie? Sorry. No, one more ahead. Sorry, that was my bad.
Oh, wrong way. I'm going. I got you.
So there's the article. And in one picture, you can see the cellar, the wine cellar, and the tunnel. There is believed to have been a second tunnel on the property. And of course, this was right in the middle of Prohibition in the United States. And Henry Glenk was allegedly a bootlegger. Can we go to the next slide? According to the July 5th, 1924 Courier Post out of Camden, New Jersey, the mansion house at Fieldsboro had been raided. The paper listed the following items as seized: some bottled beer, cordials, and sour champagne. Glenk was sentenced to pay a $100 fine. Haunted Road quotes the National Registry of Historic Places as saying, the charges read, seized 1,000 gallons of liquor, large quantities of beer, wine and whiskey were found at various places along the Delaware. My guess is having friends who were politicians was a good thing for the Glenks. Heinrich died around 1950. His wife was the proprietor until 1972. Katrina sold the property to a consortium and the name was changed to the mansion. In early 1977, the mansion was sold to Donald Zusick. He ran the restaurant and was the chef from 1978 until 1991. Several reviews about his food can be found in newspaper records. One article even talks about a snapping turtle that was kept in the kitchen. In 1991, the Stepan Company purchased the property. The original plans were to turn it into corporate headquarters for the company that is just down the street. This never happened, and over the years, the building deteriorated. In 1992, the Stepan Company planned on demolishing the building. At that point, the roof needed to be replaced, and the building was in very bad condition. Next slide, please. Go one more. The borough of Fieldsboro approached the company about purchasing the property. After some negotiations, which included a proposal by the Stepan Company to move the building to the front of the property, the ownership went to Fieldsboro. In 2004, preservation efforts began. In 2011, an archaeological dig took place and the preservation plan was completed. And in 2012, the New Jersey State Review Board for Historic Sites approved the nomination to submit White Hill Mansion to the state register, and in 2013, White Hill Mansion became a state-registered historic place. Later in 2013, a second archaeological dig took place. Next slide. Both digs were undertaken by the Field School at Monmouth University. These digs turned up Native American artifacts, foundations, pottery, and other architectural materials. I believe there is another dig scheduled for later this summer. In 2017, Fieldsboro received a grant from Burlington County to build a park adjacent to White Hill Mansion. Next slide. The park was completed in 2019. The restoration work is a complex process. It involves many layers of management, approvals, and funding. I believe the public-facing management is the Friends of White Hill Mansion. They are dedicated to the preservation of the property, while the borough of Fieldsboro owns the property. Next slide. I was lucky enough to take a tour of the mansion last Saturday, which was led by Don Reichard, the president of the Friends of White Hill Mansion. Tonight, we are joined by Kyle Mangus, who is the vice president of the Friends of White Hill Mansion. Kyle, thank you for joining us. So how'd I do in the history?
You did really good. I'm about to get you on board to start giving tours.
I don't know about that.
That's a really good history of that. I mean, it's a complex history, and you hit it pretty good.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. So my first question for you is, what can people do to help preserve White Hill? I mean, it's a beautiful building. What's out there?
So, like you guys said, historical preservation it's a complex thing, and it's very expensive. So if anyone wants to help out, you can visit the friendsofwhitehillmansion.com. There's a donate button to donate. All of the money goes directly to restoration and preservation efforts. The Friends are all volunteers. No one takes any salary. So everything that we do there goes right to saving and restoring that mansion. And you guys out there, anyone wants to come, you can visit, be for ghosts or for a history tour. Check out our friendsofwhitehillmansion.com. All the information is there.
Very cool. Jamie, I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah, we were chatting before we came online, and we warned Kyle that we are not professional journalists and interviewers and stuff. So this bear with us.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of questions though, sure. and I'll rattle through some of these if you don't mind.
No problem.
I'm an older dude, so I have I grew up in a small town in called Columbia, Pennsylvania. It was a key part of our national history early on. We were the turning point for the Civil War. The Southern Army was turned away at the river because of burning of a bridge, that key crossing point heading west toward Philadelphia, or east, toward Philadelphia. And obviously that turned everybody back to Gettysburg, which we know what happened there. Columbia was almost the national capital, so I love history. And I grew up right downtown in a historic core. I've been to White Hill, and I was overwhelmed with the amount of history coming to it. The value that this property presents is incredible. From just the layers that it provides. Through all the history Chad went through, and I'm sure there's stuff we missed. Because of the nuances. My first question for you is, how the heck did you get involved in this?
So that was an interesting story. So I have a lot of, I'm from the local area. I'm right outside of Fieldsboro in Bordentown. My family's been here since, the 1700s, in the Revolutionary War, all that. And I just loved history. So I just stumbled upon this one day. I knew it was haunted, but that wasn't my initial draw there. I was into history, and I just wanted to do something to save this. I think it's a national treasure. The things that probably have happened there that we don't know, especially during the Revolutionary time period, just amazed me. So that's how I got into it. And oddly enough, my grandparents and my dad actually used to work there when it was a restaurant. And I, just doing some research of White Hill in the area when I got on board as a volunteer, I also found that some of my family lived in Fieldsboro, and my great-grandfather was the mayor of the town when Mr. Glink owned the restaurant. And apparently they were pretty good friends at one point. They even played on the same baseball team. So it kind of all fell in there all together. And then that's how I also got into the paranormal. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's always a story.
Yes.
And the more you look, the more you find. Well, fantastic. All right. So next question, and related to some degree to that. If you could go back in time, whom of the former owners would you most want to sit down and have a conversation with?
That's a good
And why?
one. It would have to be Mary Field's second husband, Thomas Reed.
Okay.
I'm just fascinated by his story. Thomas Reed, he was his brother was George Reed from Delaware, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He also was, I think, number 6 or 7 in the newly formed U.S. Navy when it came out. So he was a pretty big deal, and I just find his story so intriguing, and I'd love to just hear more about it.
That's really cool. Okay. Different sort of question, but as a guest, as a visitor to the property, what, and obviously there's different aspects. You mentioned the historical tours, obviously the paranormal stuff, and there's different packages there. But what should someone who's never been there, what should they expect when they arrive?
They should expect to be blown away by just the sheer amount of history. I like to say at the end of my tours that you just got a snapshot of American history from before America was even a country all the way up through it all. It's been here, it's seen it. I mean, you're going to leave with a comprehensive glimpse of what American life was from the beginning all the way to even modern times.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I like I said, I did the history tour the other day with Dawn, and it was scheduled for an hour, and it took us 2 hours to get through the whole building, and then there was no time that was just like wasted. It was amazing.
Yeah, the magnitude of the different histories and what amazes me and what still keeps me going and intrigued with the story is every time we think we've figured out the history, it's just we find something new and it's like, oh, well, that changes everything. Now we're off to the races again. So people that say, history is boring, it isn't, because every time we do research, we find something new. I mean, for a long time, we thought Robert Fields was like the quintessential Quaker of his time period. But through research that we just discovered not too long ago, we found out he was really not a good Quaker. He got kicked out of the Quakers, and he was a very shrewd businessman of his time period. So that's stuff we didn't know, and it just changed kind of the trajectory of everything. So it's cool to me that no matter what we do, it's always going to be changing. We're going to find new things. It's kind of like a discovery, and it's just awesome. I love it.
That's what draws people back, though, too, because the change creates a new thing. And I recall, I've been there, and I recall being in the basement, and it was November, so that was like the warmest spot in the house because the massive furnace that's down there, was kicking off like a gazillion watts of heat. But going back beyond and kind of like the wine cellar angle, but then over on the other side, the front of the house, there's almost like something that's like used to be a caved in space.
Yes.
And I kept getting drawn to that, and I kept wondering, where did this go? What was that? And whether it's just a separate room somehow, or whether it was one of the tunnels that you alluded to, those kind of things were, and that was like, I just want to know more about it just by seeing it alone, and obviously it's been a while since, it's almost 2 years since I've been there, to see what you've done to change the property is really exciting for me to come back after this time, because, a lot of things can change with the renovations you've done and the betterment of the property and all. Yes. And the knowledge you gain in all that window of time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a loaded question.
Okay.
And I have to, because this is Paranormal Lens.
Let's do it.
Where are you at on the paranormal? Do you believe, non-believer, skeptic, full in?
I am a believer, but I'm a skeptic believer. I don't think everything is paranormal. I think a lot of it is explainable, but it's what isn't explained, and what I can't find an answer is what keeps me going and keeps me intrigued. So being at White Hill for going on, I think 5 years now. When I first started, like I said, I was like, cool, it's haunted, whatever. Let me just help out with the history. And just being there, I would experience things and I would be like, no, I can explain this, I can explain that. But like just being there enough, now I know. And that's what kind of got me into, the paranormal. It really did. It really ignited that interest of history and the paranormal, which I think are kind of hand in hand.
All right. Well, I know the answer to this question, Kyle, but I'm going to throw it out there. What happened at White Hill that made you believe?
Made me a believer in the paranormal?
Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, I was very skeptical. Things would happen. I'd hear voices, the typical, I hate to say it, haunted house things, but that's what would happen. And I would kind of just be like, whatever, it's old house, floorboards creaking, always had an excuse. But then one day I was given a history tour. All the guests left, and I had to go in the house and shut some windows and lock it up. And it was only me in the house. Went on the second floor. There's 2 small bedrooms. Went into one of the rooms, shut the window. I came out, and in the hallway was a 2 to 3 year old little boy with blonde hair, and he was staring right at me. We made eye contact, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared, just like they say in the movies. But he was real. He wasn't like see through. It was, and I didn't even register at the time because it was so real. And then that's when I was like, oh my God, this is like the real deal. I cannot not explain that. Like, I know what I saw, and that kind of rocketed me into the paranormal.
Very cool.
So that takes me to a question. Like, will you spend time there alone?
Yeah. I mean, there's
no reason to be afraid of the house or anything.
No.
And how you feel about the presences that are that's a word I just made up.
That's a good question.
What's going on there?
There's times where I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little scared, but I'm never scared that anything bad's gonna happen. I don't think there's nothing there that's evil. They're all human spirits. Some can be grumpier than others, but for the most part, I'm okay in there. Sometimes at night, after you guys leave from an investigation and I have to go in there and lock up by myself, sometimes I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, listen, don't jump out at me. I'm cool if you're here, but just don't jump out at me in a corner. I don't like the abrupt scares. But yeah, I mean, it's like any haunted location. It has its quiet times, and then it has its creepy times. There's times where it can get a little creepy in there.
Okay. So we got a question from one of our listeners, Melissa. Melissa Keller. She's a founder of our team. What is the name of the little boy? I saw him, described him to the ones there that night, and they said you met.
Yes, I remember Melissa, and I remember her describing him, because there's something about the little boy, the way he looks, that I don't tell the general public, because that's the one thing that kind of is like, okay, you definitely saw him. I remember she described him to the T. We don't know who he is. We only have 3 confirmed deaths in the house on the records. None of them were children, but Mary Fields did have 3 children. Mary Fields had 7 children. 3 only lived to adulthood. There's some speculation and there's some ongoing research that they may have died on the house and potentially could be buried on the property, but we don't have any hard evidence. But Mary Fields did have a boy around that age, that kind of, he passed at that age. So it's possible. His name was Samuel. So a lot of people have kind of coined him Samuel, but I can't say for sure if that's Samuel Fields, but it would fit. So
maybe it's something we can work on this weekend when we're there.
Exactly. And that's another thing with like White Hills history, like especially in the 1800s, there's so many people who owned it, and some of them may not even live there. They might have rented it out to a caretaker. We just don't know. And that's so a caretaker could have lived there with who knows how many kids or whatever. So there's just so much history we don't know, along with how much we do know.
Yeah. As I was doing research, and I know it was a long session, and I apologize for the length of that, but as I was doing research, I'd find, like you said, one thing, and then it would lead to like 3 other things, and it was like, oh well, there's a name, and that goes this way, and like the amount that I had to cut out was
exactly
more than what I could present. So.
I know it's tough. I know when we started researching, it's just hours and hours and pages and notebook, and you're trying to put it all together. It's like this massive puzzle.
In advance of our last visit, I did the same thing. I put together for my knowledge, like I just put this all together on paper, and that way I have a reference that I carried around in my back pocket. But it wound up being like 6 pages long, not double spaced or anything. It was just so much stuff, and it is overwhelming, when something is as deep as this space is, with history, it really, it can be a lot of things happening while you're there. And it could be a lot of crossover even happening between the options of, the history and the time and the people. It's and of course, we joke about this when, we are the resident team at Booby's Brewery back here in PA, in Lancaster, PA, or Mount Joy, PA. And, I do the intro kind of thing with rules and stuff. And I say, the one thing we're guaranteed is no one's going to walk out of the wall and introduce themselves to you.
Exactly.
And if they do, come get me.
Yeah.
So, we do a lot of interpretation, and we do a lot of things based on the history and the research and the knowns that we have. But there are so many other unknowns that the gaps are wide. And we do the best. I think everybody who's in the field, I hope everybody in the field does the best they can to do justice to the history and keeping it in that timeline or in that linear sense. But there is just so much space that it's gray, much more gray than we like.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Tim Bergen. You should know Tim. Yeah. He's been there a couple of times. Do you know what area would be considered the garden area during the Prohibition era?
So we don't have, oddly enough, a lot of pictures of the house in that time period. I don't know if it was because of the Prohibition effect of it or what, but I would suspect that it would be, if you're looking at the front of the house, the left side. So in between the main house now, and there's also another house sitting in the corner of the property as you come down the driveway. That's actually used to be the original carriage house. We think that also dates back to the 1700s, but we're not 100% sure. But oddly enough, Mr. Glink's grandson, he actually still lives there in that house. So he grew up in the White Hill Mansion, and he moved into the carriage house later on. And that's where we got a lot of the family stories from that time period, is talking to him. So he was also very wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, I think in the article that I found in the Inquirer, it mentioned the garden, and that they used a lot of things out of the garden, just because things were so tight at the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's speaking of the property as a whole, and obviously, and we were chatting earlier, how there's such a frontage and from the road end to roadside down to the property itself, in the spaces left and right. Has there been, or are there experiences outside of the physical structure of the building on the property as well? Any activity, any sightings, any experiences that have been reported?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of Native American type hauntings or activity on the exterior of the mansion. Never been on the inside, always experienced on the outside. And it seems to be kind of centered around, if you're looking at the front of the mansion where you walk into the gate, right there on the right side, kind of in front of the trailer, that wood line.
Okay.
I've seen what looked like a hand coming out of the brush, and it slowly kind of put its hand back in. It was a human hand, but it made absolutely no noise. And I know it's a thick brush. There was no one back there. We've also had a couple volunteers and a couple different people through the years who have claimed to see a full body apparition of a Native American man, kind of just always watching, just kind of standing. So.
Okay. We have a question from the group. Do you have any suggestions for trigger objects to bring? For example, do you know if a child has a favorite toy, or if someone listens to classical music, etc., or anything has gotten a response before?
So I do know, in regards to the kids, people have brought a lot of toys. They seem to like more of the, how do I word this, the early 1900s toys. Nothing super old, but nothing modern. So in that time period, so I don't know if that has something to do with the age of the child or what. There also has been, I've heard it a couple times. It sounds like a music box playing. It almost sounds like old carnival music. I'm going
to interrupt you on that. So when I was there Saturday and we were sitting down in the bar at the end of the tour, just talking, 3 or 4 times I heard like the start of a music box.
And did it sound like a wind up, like twangy one?
Yep, exactly.
I've heard it multiple times. But I do know for trigger objects, definitely down in the basement, if you play either German music or like swing music from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, that usually gets a really good response down there. It usually gets things kind of active or get things going, because it was a bar for a long time. So that residual energy, it's still there.
So that takes me to not a question so much as maybe something I think I heard, and correct me here, but there was, maybe there still is, a member of your historical society board who isn't favored in the speakeasy space in the basement.
Yeah.
Is that a true story?
That is a 100% true story. So there seems to be, from the reports and our experiences, a male spirit in the basement. And he's a rather strong personality, let's say. And he seems to not like our president, Dawn. She's been down there a couple times doing tours, and she actually had a necklace on with her name tag, kind of like a beaded thing from a cruise. And she was giving a tour, and it just popped off, and beads flew everywhere. We've also gotten EVPs down there that he hates Dawn. Very bad words. So he's a very big personality. And a lot of people who investigate report when he comes out, you kind of know, because he just kind of overtakes the investigation. So.
Okay. And that's a, my question leads to, is it just Dawn, or is this a space where, because it is, at least was perhaps speakeasy, is this a space where women aren't welcomed? So because of the establishment that it was.
Yeah. So there was a short time after Prohibition where it was a gentleman's only club. So, I mean, that could have something to do with it. We don't 100% know why he is focusing on Dawn. But he has also, he said he knows who we are. He knows my name. He knows Dawn. He kind of, I think through EVPs and spirit box sessions that people report, that he kind of understands what we're doing, like, to save the house and why people come investigate. It's actually kind of incredible to hear some of the reports and some of the evidence that people get. Is almost like, okay, this guy is really intelligent. He really knows what's going on. So it's very interesting.
Wow. We have, and I'll go back to Booby's Brewery. The original bar there was a gentleman's bar. Women weren't welcome, and the Eloise Booby, the proprietor, the creator of the space, and the namesake, is a very heavily, heavy personality at times, and the same kind of thing. And that's for us. We utilize that. We're in the bar, and there are women in their groups. That we go through the tours with and the visits with, and more times than not, a lot of times they're taunting. Saying, "I'm here. What are you going to do about it?" And that's a curious question for us. Obviously as investigators, as a tactic. Is that something we could take to our advantage, perhaps, or is that a push and poking the bear moment, where it's not necessarily a great idea to do, because obviously we don't want to bring anything benevolent forward or antagonize when we don't need to. That's not our our stick when we're out there in the field. So more of a curious thing than not. But I have one more question for you, and we're not short on time by any means. So please, we Chad, of course, go forward too. But it's a two-part question. The first part is, what is your favorite space at the property?
My favorite space.
What part of the house draws you the most? Where do you like to be the most when you're there?
I like the front parlor. It's the most comfortable for me. We've gotten some really good EVPs in there, and it has a very calming, peaceful feel. But my favorite place to investigate, if that's your second part, would be... Not
exactly, but go ahead.
My favorite place to investigate would probably be the attic. Would probably be the attic.
I won't argue that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second part of that then was, where don't you like to go or like to be in the house?
The attic. Yeah. So it has its moments for me. I love investigating the attic, but it can get really creepy up there really quick, which is also cool. But there's some nights where, after like an investigation, I'll have to go in and lock up the house, and I'll get to the top of the attic steps, and I'll look up, and it has just a vibe that I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I'm sure everything's fine up there. And
what could be wrong?
Yeah. So, but it's just one of those places where, as an investigator and as a historian, it intrigues me, because we don't have a lot of history up there, and the hauntings, I can't seem to make any sense of it. It kind of just does whatever it wants. So
interesting.
I want to know how the cistern got up there on the far end of the house.
That's a good question.
That's a modern marvel to me. I mean, I'm sure it was built in place kind of thing, but like looking at it, like, why? First of all, how and why is this here?
They dated that to about the 1860s, because I think it was on almost like railroad tracks. Okay. So we don't really know, but I think they probably had to build it in pieces, I'm thinking. But other than that, I don't know how, unless they took down the wall and re-put it back up, I wouldn't think they would do. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of a modern marvel, and apparently that was like one of the first houses in New Jersey, from what we're hearing, that had like that kind of indoor plumbing. So they basically would pump water in from a well. It was basically indoor water tank, and it would gravity feed through pipes in the house. So it's pretty cool.
It's impressive. I mean, the fact that it's still intact, all this is pretty cool, and you don't expect to find it.
No, you would think in 300 years or at least 150 years that somebody would be like, we don't need this thing anymore. Let's get it out of there. And it's still there. Still there.
Sort of like the vats at Boobies, huh, Jamie?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They're not going anywhere. That's true. Down the basement in the catacombs for sure. Tim has another question. Do you know what the next section is slated for excavation is?
So I believe they just performed ground penetrating radar, which is in the advanced stages to, I guess, see where they're going to dig. They dug on the left side of the house last time, so I think they're going to try to focus more on the front side of the property and more towards the right side of the property. And I think that's going to be early fall. So definitely check our Facebook page too, because I believe part of that will be open to the public, because a local university, Monmouth University, will be doing the dig, and they open it up to the public to kind of see what they're doing. So that would be a really, really cool thing. And they're actually, part of it, they were looking for a collapsed tunnel or another collapsed room somewhere off the basement that somewhere along the lines was speculated, and they're trying to prove it or disprove it. So it'd be really interesting to see what they actually find with that one. And if it stirs up any activity, who knows?
Don made it sound like it's already...
never do that.
Yeah, Don made it sound like it might already be stirring up some things, but
yeah, there's some recent activity down in the basement. A lot of shadows in an area, not in the bar area, the other side, that have seemed to increase significantly. So maybe it has something to do with the ground penetrating radar. I don't know.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Well, I've been going through some pictures. Do you want to, if I bump through them, you want to tell us what the areas are and if there's anything we should look for there? Or
yeah, absolutely. So you got these three pictures here. The top one there, that's the front parlor. That's where I feel the most comfortable. That was probably the main entertaining area for the house's whole, basically, life. That's where Mary Fields in the 1700s would have probably greeted all those notable people that came through, the Hessians, the British. I've done some EVP sessions in there, have gotten some really, really cool answers. Sound like a woman saying something about her husband in the river. We've also done Estes method in there that has gotten some really, really cool results. But that's a really, really cool space. Right below it is, so the house kind of has two parts. So there's the 1760 side of the house, and there's an addition that they think was put on in the 1790s. But there's also some speculation that might be part of the original 1723 house somehow. So the archaeologists and the historians are still going back and forth, because it's so many different levels of renovation through the years. It's hard to tell. But in the restaurant years, that would have been the formal commercial kitchen. Now, it doesn't look like that at all, because we've actually had to pull down the ceiling and gut the room to repair the floorboards above it, because the room was actually sinking. So that's what those newer beams were there. That just kind of shows you how much work goes into historical preservation, because once they gutted that room, they had to study all of the flooring to see which era the floor came from. Some of the wallpaper, there's still some wallpaper that dates back to the 1800s on there. So it's like uncovering levels and kind of researching to kind of see what they have to do, to what to save. And it's just a really, really long process that I don't think the public kind of can get a grasp of it. And this is a perfect example of it. So I loved showing this room because it just shows how much work goes into historical preservation.
Okay.
That kind of there's a question on the board from Brittany that, are there areas of the house that aren't open to investigations or investigators currently? I think that picture describes it pretty well. There's some, and I kind of recall there's some soft spots occasionally,
Yeah.
things where you got to just, obviously not structurally deficient, but, places where you aren't going to go clumping through.
Exactly.
And if I remember upstairs, there is a kitchen perhaps in the back.
Yes.
That was kind of cordoned off, not the door closed, but clearly a barrier not to step through. That kind of thing. And that was the most interesting thing to find that upstairs.
So most of the house is open to the public. There's only certain areas that we've roped off for preservation to keep the foot traffic out of it, and for some safety reasons. Like you said, the house is structurally sound, but there's just a couple locations where we just don't want the general public going in because of, one, some safety hazards, and two, because it's probably really, really old and we're just trying to maintain, the integrity of the historical aspect of it. We just don't want too many people in there. So.
So we have different pictures here. What are some of these spaces? If I remember correctly, the one in the upper left-hand corner is some of the original tile work from the potter who lived there, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's some of the original pottery work from Joseph Mayer. He invented a very special way of glazing tiles, and allegedly he did a lot of his work in the mansion in the basement. There's rumors he had a kiln down there, and when they had the archaeological dig, they did find a lot of pottery making material in the dig. So it's probably he did a lot of work there. But that's the original one of the original fireplaces that dates back to about 1880. That room right there we call the Crossley room, and the room behind it is a dining room. That's still in the 1760 side of the house. It kind of gives you an idea of what the Crossley family, when the Crossley family owned the house, they changed the entire house. So before they came in, it was just a square box. A colonial house is usually just a square box, very symmetrical. They blew out the back of the house and the front of the house to make it look like a grand Victorian style house. So anything, as you guys go through the house or see any of these pictures, anything that looks from the Victorian area was done by the Crossley family. So those two rooms weren't active for a really long time. And then we got a donation from descendants of the Crossley family. There was actually a desk in there that was Archibald. That was his father's desk. And we put that in there, and that table was donated by the family too. And we don't know if it stirred up some kind of activity, but there's been a lot of shadow figures seen in those two areas since then. So.
One thing that Dawn pointed out the other day that was interesting, you can tell what was blown out if you look at the floorboards, because the wide old floorboards are in place, and if there's anything that's really narrow, it's from that new era.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. The two bottom pictures are from the second story. There was considered a small bedroom at the time. That's on the addition part of the house. So the house has been changed so many times through the years, so we don't know exactly what it looked like or what it was in colonial times or even in the 1800s. But we do know that when this was a restaurant, half of the second story was private living space, and the other half was open to the public. So this was actually the kids' bedroom. A lot of activity in these two rooms. Definitely EVPs. I've caught EVPs in here. I've actually told a joke and got an intelligent response of a male saying, haha, good one. Very sarcastically, might I add. But yeah, that room is another hot spot.
Okay, cool.
So this is the, like you guys alluded to, there was a time period where the attic, part of the attic was allegedly a bordello. We can't prove it, but we also can't disprove it. There's just no information on it. But this is one of the many mysteries of White Hill. So this was actually a closet that had attic space, that had access to an attic space that was actually converted into a master bathroom. And then they put this kind of dumbwaiter door to cover up the staircase to go up there. And that is one of those areas where you cannot go. See the signs, do not enter. So there's a much easier way to get up to the attic than that way. But that's one of the many mysteries of White Hill. Why wouldn't you just close it up? Why would you put like a little trap door? I don't know. Who knows, right?
Yep.
All right. So that top one is part of what has been known as the bloody bathroom. There's a bathtub in there. A lot of people have come through the years, psychic or sensitive, and saying they see blood or someone that died in the tub. Now, again, we've only had 3 deaths on the property that we know of. And they were all natural causes. So we can't prove or disprove something happened in the bathroom, but it's a cool place to investigate. A lot of people lay in the tub and investigate and kind of get some experiences. So the other two pictures are from what we call Annis's bedroom. So this is back into the 1760 side of the house. And Annis Bidet Stockton was she was Richard Stockton's wife. After his death, he moved in she moved in with her daughter-in-law and lived in the house. She was very notable in her time period because she was actually a poet, and she was personal pen pals with George Washington. So she was kind of a bigwig of her time. She was one of the 3 confirmed deaths. That fireplace there is very interesting because it's been vandalized when the house was vacant. But it actually exposed the original fireplace behind it. If you kind of look in the corner, you can kind of see the colonial round shape. And then it exposed some really kind of cool tiles on there that kind of we think date to the 1800s. They look like some kind of Greek themed or Olympic themed kind of tile work. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you can see the 2 different styles of fireplaces in that.
Yeah, there's the bloody bathroom again with the bathtub. And then there's the attic stairs. And the staircase actually here, the main staircase in the house as you come in is one of the big focal points when you first walk through the door. It's actually not the original. We don't know what the colonial staircase even looked like. There was some speculation that it was a spiral staircase, but we just don't know. But this was actually one of the Crossley family's big renovations to the house that actually was imported from Louisiana in 1896 and was installed. So it must have been a very big project to do.
There is not a shortage of stairs in this house.
No, absolutely not.
And I believe there were some that aren't even there anymore from that one section.
Yep. Yeah. It's an ungodly amount of stairs. You'll get your steps in. So that top left, that's part of one of the bedrooms on the first floor. A lot of activity in there. There's also been an older gentleman that's been seen waving out the window to people who are outside the house. It's never when they're in the house. It's always people on the outside of the house just walking around the property. And then the rest of the pictures are up from the attic. I don't even know how to begin with the attic. So many different hauntings up there. We don't know a lot of history. We kind of think that David Bruce, the typesetter, invented some of his machinery up in that attic. Mr. Glink's daughter lived up there for a short time. I don't know how she did it without air conditioning. I mean, you guys have been there. It's warm. And then that bottom left picture is the rumored area where the bordello was. So there was some speculation that was used as a bordello. There's 3 rooms and one in the back there where you can kind of see that cistern we were talking about. In that time period, the records really aren't that great. So there's speculation that it was used as a bordello, but it also could have been used as kind of a boarding house because at that time, the railroad behind the house was just opening up and the river was heavily trafficked with riverboat traffic. And the next town over, Bordentown, was a big stop on your way to Philadelphia and New York. So we just don't know. But down in that area, people have been touched. We've set a recorder in that area and let it run overnight, and we got 3 minutes of a music box playing. There's no electricity. There's nothing to play music in that attic at all. So
am I correct to say that there's also a very curious access point to get to this part, the lower left picture, like down and a short door, and it just it doesn't look like it should be this space behind the door.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really small angled cut door. It's kind of awkward to get down in there. So it is very bizarre. So yeah.
And then the white, what looks like a white picture there actually looks like some pencil.
Yeah, there's on the wall in the one room
names and stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So that's really cool. So that actually, when the wallpaper fell off, that actually showed who wallpapered it. So I think it says someone's name and it's dated 1904. So it's kind of cool. I guess that's what they did back then to sign their names and whatnot.
Cool. It always makes you, and you've seen enough with the renovation, you know, what you're going to find behind the wall, you know.
Exactly.
You know, people like to sign their work. Obviously not just artwork, but all kinds of things. And craftsmen are no different.
Exactly.
And it gets a really cool piece of this process as you're going through and, what you're finding.
Mm-hmm.
It's
uncovering the past. It's really cool. So this is down in the basement. That first photo is behind the basement stairs. When this was a bar, that was their phone booth. So that phone still dates back to probably, I would think, maybe the 40s. I'm not 100% sure. There's been people who've done spirit box sessions and heard a phone ringing.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but a couple people have reported that. And the other picture there is in the basement, and that's basically right above the parlor upstairs. And there's some speculation that could have been one of the entrances to one of the tunnels that led down to the river. But the archaeologists are still kind of researching that and uncovering it. So hopefully in the archaeological dig, they might find something that will lead to maybe that is one of the entrances.
Cool. Now, in that one article where Mrs. Glink talked about the wine cellar, is this the wine cellar or is that a different?
No, that's on the other side of the basement. We call it the older side of the basement where Mr. Glink didn't dig down. So it's more of a colonial style. But if you go that picture that you saw, it actually is, you take 3 steps down, you walk a couple feet and there's a 90-degree turn. And that's where the tunnel would have went out. One of the tunnels they know would have went out that way. They both collapsed around the 60s, and we're assuming were filled in, and that one was bricked over, and then they just used it as a wine cellar for storage. So,
if I'm not mistaken, you can stand at the back of the bar and look straight across to that space, correct? Okay, and that allows you to have that kind of distance shot for shadows and.
Yep.
It was a slight bit uncomfortable, and I think part of it was because the furnace was kicking so much heat for a November investigation, but. It was a little weird there as far as just feel.
It's almost
to historic places too.
It's almost sometimes like when you walk from the 1760 side of the house to the older side or the renovated side or the addition. Sometimes it doesn't matter what floor you're on, you kind of can feel. It almost feels like you're. I don't want to say passing through a veil, but it changes. It feels different. So I could be similar to that down there.
And then this is the bar, right?
Yep, this is the bar. This is the bar that when Mr. Glink bought the house in 1922, he dug that out 3 feet by hand and put in this speakeasy. So everything down there, woodworking wise, and the bar dates back to 1922. So it's over 100 years old. So
cool. It's a cool space.
It is. Yeah. It's a very active place too.
Okay. Well, that's all the pictures that I've got for that. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about, or like anything we need to know?
I'm sure there's a lot of history that we didn't even touch upon yet. But I think the biggest thing is just for me being a paranormal investigator and a historian and working to save a historic location is the paranormal really helps boost fundraising. I mean, without it, White Hill would be way behind in our renovations. So everyone just keep coming out and supporting all these haunted locations because, without it, they won't be there and then we won't really have anywhere to investigate. So saving history and exploring the paranormal goes hand in hand. And I think it's so important.
Okay. What options do you have at White Hill for paranormal investigations? I know you can do private group investigations. You can do history tours, which are fairly inexpensive.
Yep. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So we have we try to give everyone a little bit of everything. So we have our history events, which are sometimes we have history days once a year. We try to get reenactors there and have a whole outdoor event. But we do our weekend history tours, which is primarily the history. We do also offer candlelight tours, which are a little bit different. So we give you a little history, but we go a little bit more heavy on the paranormal. And we actually have paranormal investigators who kind of donate their time to come out and kind of give you a little taste of what it is. So they'll do a little 10-minute EVP session with you in a certain room and kind of try to get you involved. And it's like another level of it. And then we have public investigations where paranormal groups come in and you can buy tickets and investigate with them. And then we do offer private investigations for more seasoned people So everything is available right from our website. All the information is there. And like I said, everything that we raise, everything we do goes right back to saving this amazing historic property.
At one point, I think I saw you had done a Paracom. Are there plans for that in the future? Or?
Yeah. So I think this May we did a Paracon. We haven't had one in a long time, but it was really, really successful. We had a huge turnout. So there is talks that there'll probably be one again next year. So
cool.
But all that information's on our website and on our Facebook page and all that. So we're constantly updating. So check it out.
Okay. And what's your address for the website?
It's whitehillmansion.org.
Okay. Cool. And do you know offhand what your Facebook is? It same thing for Facebook?
It's Friends of White Hill Mansion on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. So, Jamie, any other questions?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you.
Yes.
This is we get around. Like I think everybody in the field tries to get out. We have a home base project for ourselves that ties us in every other weekend almost, and getting the time between all the other things that we do, to get out to other locations. But where we are in South Central PA, we're like an hour and 40 minutes maybe. It's a home game almost. To be able to come over and zip in and get back out. Thank God for the turnpike, I guess. But some of our team members can make it in much less time. But you never, not to say the breaking the law, Matt. But with having access to a place like this and having the chance to come back and back again, like I love going to places, and sometimes they're so far away that we don't get the chance to go back. One, because of distance, and obviously these all come to a cost, but the opportunity to do other things. White Hill feels like home, and I want to stress that because it is a home. And it's been loved for so many generations, over the hundreds of years of its existence. And y'all are doing such a fantastic job of presenting it as such, and I think that matters. And anybody who's watching us who hasn't gotten there yet, get there. Book the time, take the trip, make a day of it, make a weekend of it. I know you do Friday, Saturday nights with group investigations. Spend the weekend. There's cool stuff to see elsewhere in the area as well. And really. It's going to be worth the time and the effort to be there. And the activity of this property, as my recollection, was pretty incredibly cool. And we've had some weird things happen that night too. I recall upstairs, and I mentioned the frontage, being so far off the road. There's nothing behind the house. There's a drop off of the cliff, and you're going down to the river. There's a train track, which is well below grade of the house. There's no light pollution out there other than stars, And I remember being in the attic. And in that the room to the right of coming up the steps, how the single room is off to the left at the corner of the house, standing there and just looking down that hallway and just seeing something walking back and forth.
Yep.
We had a static camera there. Tim had it set up there. The camera actually got moved. No one in the space. We had some EVPs, stuff like that coming through. It's just in the attic alone, much less the other floors, the other three floors. You get the second, first, and basement. This place is so big. There's so much to do there. Get there and do it. You won't be disappointed. I really appreciate you having us there and having the opportunity for us to come back and again. Thank you so very much to you and the society.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming back all the time.
Of course.
Keep the doors open.
Keep the light on and we'll come back.
Yeah.
I should turn the lights off and we'll come back.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, Kyle, you're more than welcome to come visit us at Boobies anytime as well. So come over and check that out.
You're always on the list.
All right, cool. I'll have to check that out. It's been on my list.
All right. Speaking of that, Jamie, should I?
We should probably go, right? It's past our bedtime.
Yeah.
So we got some stuff coming up. Obviously, Saturday night we are going to be at White Hill with Jotniks New Jersey, our sister team, Jotniks Paranormal. We're going to hit it hard. There is a lot of equipment coming. Some things we probably didn't have the last time, at least my last time. So that's really cool. We're gonna advance thank Tim Bergen for all the gear he brings, all the cool toys, and all the fun that he brings too, and he and Erica and the team there. Coming up for us though, back home, we have a public investigation at Boobies on August 5th. We're going to get on the road again the following weekend. There's a lot coming up. On the 11th and 12th, the following weekend, we're going to go up to Hinsdale, New York, and hit the Hinsdale House. and the Wildwood Sanatorium. I've been to Hinsdale. I haven't been to the sanatorium. And what a cool place that is, to another old historical property with a lot of shady history happening there. Some bad mojo there, perhaps, that really leads to some fantastic activity opportunities. And Dan Clays, who owns the place, both places, done a fantastic job presenting both to the public. We're looking forward to getting back up there, back home again on the 19th, and then back out again coming back to Jersey, actually. And Kyle, this is an opportunity if you want to join us here. We're going up to Red Mill, and we have a big night there. We're going to be there for 7 or 8 hours, I believe. Here's the poster for it.
Oh, cool.
The highlight of this one is Daryl Marston, of course, from the previously of Ghost Hunters, and now an author as well as owner of Paranormal Warehouse. Ron and Lourdes, Chris Mendez, and our Jot Next New Jersey team, our home team. We're all going to be there. It's a big place, and it's got a lot of history there as well. It's a really cool establishment.
Cool.
We're looking forward to it. Somewhere in the middle of the evening, we're going to take a little bit of break, build a bonfire, tell some ghost stories, toast some marshmallows, the good stuff, and then get back into it and investigate even some more. So much more to come on that, but it's not that far off anymore, folks. So if you're interested at all, tickets are moving on this, and it is going to be a limited engagement event. So do not wait to get tickets if you're interested in coming and joining us. And there is a link there on how to do so. And then the usual stuff for us, how to follow us. Facebook is our thing, but our TikTok page has grown drastically. We have some members of our Jersey team who have a 12-year-old who knows how to use TikToks, and now we do too. Right. So yay!
No, Jamie, we don't.
We don't. No, we have kids that know how to do it too, but we don't know how. Right? Yeah, they don't talk to us. Teenagers, go figure. But TikTok, obviously, we're putting a lot more content up there from the previous investigations. We were just out at Crescent not too long ago. There's a lot of cool stuff there, and the Grand Midway Hotel out in Windber. So there's a lot of evidence that we collected there also on those sites. Instagram, YouTube. This is also cast on YouTube as well as here on Facebook Live, so you can get back and look at it later. So please jump in, give us a like, give us a follow, and see what we're up to as we go. We're certainly trying to get more content out there for you also to see what we're up to. And your opinion matters. Even here, there's been a lot of engagement tonight with this conversation. And if there's more, touch base with us. If you have questions after the fact of this episode, you're watching it later, hey, drop us a line. We'll follow up. We certainly aren't shy about that. We love the engagement that we get from folks who are also in the field with us or who are curious about being in the field. And, obviously this is what drives us. So we appreciate your investment of your time, and hopefully we can connect.
And look for evidence after this weekend on our stuff. And if it's okay, Kyle, we'll share it with you. And
yeah, absolutely.
That's my question for you, Chad. And we have not talked about this, so bear with me. Are we going to do next week's episode as far as a reveal of our evidence from Saturday?
I think it might be a little quick. I mean, it's going to take time to process that. We can try, but we do need to touch base.
Yeah, we do, because I got to figure out an episode. Thanks. It's my turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay! All right, I'll figure it out. I got it. And lastly, I think that's everything there. So, and lastly, again, I can't say thank you enough to Kyle, and everything you guys are doing. We really look forward to seeing you Saturday night. And
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing
what you
guys can uncover. So it'll be fun.
All right. Any parting thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, we did want to wrap up one thing.
You're right. Absolutely. So I think everybody has noticed that we're missing someone tonight by now. David Daramidi, our co-host, has opted to step away for a little while. David's doing some personal things that are requiring his time and attention. And we're probably not going to see him on an episode for at least a while. Maybe not again, depending on how things elevate with what he's up to. But we wish him the best. And we really want to say thanks, Dave. We talked after our last episode offline of this, and I gave him this credit, and I will share with all of you. Our very, very first episode, we didn't know what we were doing, right? And like anytime you start something new, and Dave took point on that episode, and each of us bring a topic, and we discuss it, and hopefully, we generally the others don't know what it's going to be all about until we get here, so hence it's new. Dave brought the Ogopogo cryptid from the Pacific Northwest as the premiere episode, and came with such information, graphics, details, personal experiences. He's been to the space where the lake is, and it was a bar raising or standard setting episode that I personally said, "Oh shit, we gotta get this going," because this dude just rocked it. And it hopefully that has come through on other episodes, the pace and the bar that Dave set for us that very first episode, and all the ones these last 13 before this. Chad, you and I joke a lot, like how, what are we going to do, all that stuff. But Dave always seemed like he knew what he was doing. So I give him credit, and I want to say thanks a lot. And hopefully we'll see him back sometime in the nearest future. The door is always open, and the camera's always going to be rolling for him. So Dave, we thank you for everything so far, and we hope to see you again soon.
All right, I think that's about it. Kyle, thank you. We're going to roll the end credits here, and then we'll see you in about 30 seconds. All right.
All right.
Thanks everybody for watching. Good night.
Thank you. Maybe my computer's being difficult tonight.